Good morning. I'm Peter Stanton, publisher of the Worcester Business Journal, and we're happy to have all of you joining us today for today's webcast, Building a Better Business Through Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Fostering a diverse, inclusive workplace is essential to develop and maintaining a culture of respect and equity in your business. And more leaders are finding that it's not just the right thing to do, but also the smart thing to do for the future of their organization. Regardless of the size of your organization, there are tangible steps within your reach that can strengthen your operation. And our panel today will discuss some of the best practices for making sustainable progress on the DEI front. This session is brought to you by the support of our presenting sponsor, Fidelity Bank. Fidelity Bank is a community bank based in Leominster with 13 banking centers from Winchendon to Millbury to Needham. Throughout its nearly 140-year history, Fidelity Bank has been supporting and caring for its clients, communities, and colleagues in any way it can. Now here to say a few welcome remarks is Ed Manzi, the Chairman and CEO of Fidelity Bank. Ed.
Good morning. Thank you, Peter, for that nice introduction. We are so grateful for the opportunity to sponsor such an important event like this and have the opportunity to tell you a little bit about who we are and what makes us different. So as Peter mentioned, we're a 135-year-old community bank with local roots. We've been serving families, individuals, businesses, municipalities in central Massachusetts in a manner consistent with our unique life design banking brand promise since 1888. That promise is described best in three words: care, clarity, and confidence. Our clients, like all of you, face multiple decisions about money and banking on a regular basis, daily, weekly, monthly. It seems like it never ends if you think about it. And because of our unique life design brand promise, our bankers use a simple, powerful, exclusive four-step care process to help them get the clarity that they need about what the right decision is at that point and why, whether it's a big decision or a small one, so they can move forward with confidence. And we all know how important that is. In fact, based on the feedback we received, we've come to realize that this clarity and confidence promise is the most important thing, the most valuable thing we do for them. And that's particularly true in a world like today where everything's so volatile, there's so many choices, which makes the decision-making process even more complex. Speaking of important things, the DEI focus of this webinar is extremely important to the world that we live in and to us at Fidelity Bank. I look forward to learning and listening to the panel today so that my colleagues and I can continue to build on the steps that we have taken to strengthen our efforts and to ensure, as Peter said, that this is deeply embedded in our culture and becomes even more sustainable part of our business. Now, you're going to hear from Sheila King-Goodwin, who's the leader of our community banking division and on this panel. So I don't want to steal her thunder. So I'm just going to share one thing that I think is particularly important in our efforts. And that is the significant emphasis that we place on the inclusion part of diversity, equity, inclusion. Obviously, diversity and equity are critical components, but sometimes I like to say they are necessary, but not enough. Because if your work environment is not inclusive, hitting the statistical requirements or your goals will not matter much. People need to feel safe, valued, and empowered to be their authentic self so they can contribute meaningfully to your bank, the fabric of your culture and the success of your business, regardless of their race, creed, color, sexual orientation, personality type. In other words, the entire spectrum of humanity needs to feel included for those efforts to really bear fruit the way that we all want to. On the wall of the boardroom at Fidelity Bank, we put a few sayings, and this one has been up there for the last 15 years. It says, if you value the differences in people, the differences will produce value. We are clearly not perfect. We're always trying to get better. But that saying has been and continues to be a guiding principle in our journey. So thank you again for the opportunity to sponsor this event, and I look forward to learning from all of you. Thank you, Peter. Back to you.
Appreciate it, Ed, and thank you, Fidelity Bank, as well for your commitment to valuable programs like today's session. Additionally, I want to thank our supporting sponsor, Community Health Connections, for their support. Community Health Connections is a federally qualified health center in North Central Mass that has been serving anyone and vulnerable populations in need of health care for 20 plus years. So thank you again for your support. Before we jump into the panel discussion, just a couple of quick notes. For the audience, if you have a question, please type it into the Q&A box, which is, I think, on most screens down at the bottom. And we'll get to as many of those questions as we can. Today's webcast is also being recorded, and a link to that recording will be sent to all attendees after the event. So now let's get started. I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's session, and that is Valerie Zolezzi-Wyndam, who is the founder and owner of Promoting Good LLC. Valerie is an innovator and a leader who is skillful at facilitating, coaching, and training at all levels of an organization. She's an equity and leadership coach to C-suite and rising leaders. She has a deep commitment to helping organizations build inclusion from the front lines to the board. As a result, organizations and the communities she serves are stronger and more impactful. So thank you, Valerie, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Ed, for your welcoming comments about this really important topic. It is a pleasure to be here with you and to share the stage with three amazing leaders in our community who come from very different sectors. We wanted to provide you today with an opportunity to hear how this work is being done across different types of organizations. And so let me introduce our wonderful panel to you. The way that I'm going to do these introductions, I'm going to introduce the panelists one by one, and I'm going to invite them to share a 1-minute greeting about what drives them to do this work. I'm going to start with Dr. Brian Gibbs, who is the Vice President and Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at UMass Memorial Health System. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning, Valerie. And I'd like to thank the sponsors. Thank you again. It's great to have been a part of this esteemed panel. Appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to discuss this very important topic. I consider this work a calling. I was an occupational therapist and practiced for 17 years and loved the one-to-one patient care experiences while working in communities of color. I also saw how my patients were suffering from health conditions that could have been prevented or delayed significantly. I also saw that diversity was lacking in the health professions, and I wanted to move upstream and help impact the quality of care that all patients received early and often by influencing how healthcare sees and provides equitable care to all patients, no matter their.
Thank you very much, Brian. We look forward to hearing from you as we move to the next part of the panel. Next, I want to introduce Sheila King-Goodwin, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Community Banking Officer at Fidelity Bank. Sheila, what drives you to do this work?
Thank you, Valerie, and good morning, everyone. What drives me is really my overall passion for making this world a better place to live, work, and raise our families. And to me, you can only do that when you feel safe to be your authentic selves, when you have equal opportunities to thrive, where systems of wealth building are equally applied, and that's particularly important in the financial services area, and where diverse voices are included, and decisions that are made with all of us in mind. So that really is what drives me, being one of a few African Americans in financial services. It's really important for me to make sure that we are applying everything equally in the financial services area.
Thank you, Sheila, and it's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Next, I want to introduce Liz Wambui, who is the Director of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Impact at Fontaine Brothers. Liz, what drives you to do this work?
Great. Thank you so much, Valerie, and thank you, Worcester Business Journal, for hosting this, amazing forum, and to the sponsors, and to all of you who are here this morning. So, what drives me to do this work? I feel like in every career that I've had, really at the core of it is being in service of and with others. I think, being able to, be in a position where we recognize all, the injustices that so many folks have suffered, and being able to play a role in helping change that, and similar to what Sheila said, build communities that do include everyone, right? Where everyone does have a voice, where everyone has a chance to succeed, right? And do the things that, will, help them and their families be happy. So that's really what drives me to do this work.
Wonderful. Thank you, Liz. And I'm going to share that for me, I do this work because I think each of us deserves to thrive wherever we are, right? Whether it's at play, at school, or at work. And I hear in the remarks that each of you made, right, the passion that is required and the care of people that is required for this work to move forward. And so thank you for having that drive and being in the community with me to do this work. So as I was preparing for this panel, I was thinking about what would be the most useful thing that we could do in an hour, right? None of you are going to leave being experts in an hour, right? And if you think it's possible, you're wrong. This work is about a practice. And so what we want to do today is to leave you with some solid tips about concrete ways that you can move to action. And so my first question, and I'm going to start with Brian, then we're going to go to Liz, and then we're going to go to Sheila. I want you to share how you concretely move DEI intentions in your work. And we'll start with Brian and then move to Liz.
Yeah, thank you, Valerie. I think that's a great question. And I appreciate the intentions that you are putting behind why we're here and what we want our listeners to take away. The reality is that this is a journey and we're all on it across the planet. No one is free of it. The demographics are changing and there are new generations demanding more and better. And that's what we want, to continue to evolve. And in the process, what we don't want to do is do it at the expense of our humanity, our ability to see and connect with one another. The past 3 years have been tough for healthcare in particular throughout the country due to the COVID pandemic, social unrest, and politics. When you consider all three, UMass is no exemption. We've had to think and move quickly due to the rapid changes in science and research in response to how we provide care and how we protect our caregivers. At times, we rely on old ways of thinking, but the times require us to sometimes slow down and reconsider our actions. An example of that is the way in which we communicate, the way we want to, in a very urgent way, convey our changes in policies and practices that will impact over 17,000 employees, who, by the way, are individuals who have their own beliefs and cultural backgrounds that come into play when you consider such things. We had as UMass leadership had to convene to figure out how we were going to handle the issue of vaccination and subsequently booster. We made the decision that we would mandate vaccinations and therefore require our employees as a condition of employment to receive the COVID vaccine and subsequently, as I said, the COVID booster. That didn't go over all that well because people don't want to be told what to do. However, in protecting our patients, it was a requirement that was a hard decision, but a necessary one to move forward, and not just to protect our patients, but also one another as caregivers. So our employees were allowed to apply for a medical or religious exemption. However, the process to apply for those exemptions was all in English. Everything from the application, the way in which the applications were reviewed, and whatever was the decision communicating back to the caregiver who chose to submit an application. We discovered that when the decision was delivered, it was not clear. It was in English and not necessarily where the nuances behind what was the decision understood. So what we had to do was we had to back up. And through the persistence of a good number of people, we reversed course. We allowed for people to apply for an exemption in their native language. So their application was then submitted to reviewers who were looking for things primarily in English. And so the applications needed to be translated into English. And then when the decisions were made, they were translated back into the preferred language. And that minimized the ways in which we could build or reduce the level of friction within the organization and enhance the opportunities for inclusion. But we had to do it differently, and it wasn't necessarily an easy course for us who were on speed course and thinking that the ways in which we communicate, we're reaching all of our caregivers when in fact.
Thank you, Brian, for that. And I think what I want to highlight in Brian's story is that this work requires us to slow down, right? And it requires us, before we implement, to think about, is this thing that we are designing going to impact everybody equitably? And in order for it to be equitable, right, it might mean that there are adjustments that are necessary that create different solutions for different people. And so I think the concrete tip there, right, is before you implement, ask yourself, is what you're implementing going to work for everybody? And if not, don't implement until you figure out how that solution is going to work for your community. So thank you for that, Brian. Liz.
Yes.
I look forward to hearing from you how you are concretely moving from intentions to action at Fontaine.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for the question. And just for a little bit of context for folks about my my role here at Fontaine. So, one of my primary responsibilities is to help make sure that we have, anyone who's working on our projects are representative of the communities in which we work, right? So we're working with our project partners, our subcontractors, union representatives, basically, and any of the folks involved in the process of construction to make sure that we achieve that goal. Part and parcel to that is, we have really, leaned into workforce development, right? Realizing that in order for us to continue, not just Fontaine, right, for our industry to continue being, successful and having the folks, who are going to, be implementing this work, we need to start early, and we need to make sure that we're reaching out into the community to make sure that we are, drawing folks who have been historically left out of the industry. And so one concrete way that we did that is, having, me in this position to really, help maintain the focus and drive drive the work, right? For those of you who, we all know, right? Like we all, have many things on our to-do list. And so for our project managers, this, for us to do this well, we needed to have, someone like myself come in and play that supporting role. And so one thing too that we've done that's really unique, I think we've developed company fundamentals, right? So these are things that we've identified that are important to our culture here at Fontaine. And, diversity and inclusion is one of those, right? So we, before starting, any meetings, we use that, those fundamentals as a way to ground us in our work and, help us reflect on the importance of the work that we are doing. And I think one, key takeaway with that is that this then becomes all of our shared responsibility, right? So this doesn't just live with me. It doesn't, just, live with our CEO. We're all in this together. And through that, we've actually been able to develop shared language, right? Because I mean, I'm guilty of, walking around, using terms and phrases that may not be familiar to folks. And so this has actually helped us start, setting those, setting those expectations and, helping. So when we're in communication with each other, we all know what we are, speaking of. So that's been, another thing that we've done. And then also in our weekly meetings, this is, a topic that is on the agenda every single week, right? Again, in order to do this well, we need to give it the importance, that it deserves. And so that's also another critical way in which we've been able to do this work internally and with our project teams.
Thank you, Liz. And I love the story of Fontaine Brothers and the commitment that they have made, right, by bringing Liz on to be in this role and to help the company, right, start to build this practice, right, of leading with diversity and inclusion. And the things that Liz talked about might not seem like huge things, but they are everyday things. And it is through those everyday practices, right, that you start to build buy-in, build sort of commitment, and that the work starts to happen and build over time. And so thank you, Liz, for that. Sheila, I want to invite you to share how you are moving DEI from intention to action at Fidelity.
Sure, and very similar to Liz, it is a million little things that really drives the change. What happened with us is the change started at the top with our chairman and CEO, Ed Manzi. You just heard him kick the session off, but really he started the chain of events, and we created a framework in terms of putting the right organizational pieces in place. We have an inclusion and diversity advisory board. That advisory board is made up of Ed, other leadership members, corporators, board members, and those individuals help us drive how we plan to impact change in the community. But we also took a step back and said, we can't impact change in the community without first impacting change internally. So we created our own Inclusion and Diversity Council made up of a diverse group of colleagues that are impacting change and driving our culture within the organization. So we have an inward focus as well as we have an external focus on the community. So this framework has really helped us move intentions into actions. So from doing things from driving a new vendor diversity management policy, from driving educational components on a weekly, daily, monthly basis to our colleagues, from driving new programs and initiatives, from driving new enhanced training, which goes from our senior leaders down to our branch colleagues. So we've done a million small things that have really moved the needle and has impacted change within our organization. And the great thing about what we're doing also is we make it a part of our strategic plan. So as we, similar to Liz, this is something that we live and breathe. So from our strategic focus to our from our senior management meetings to our core team meetings, this is just a fabric of who we are, and this is how we've moved the needle for us from a diversity and inclusion perspective.
Thank you, Sheila. What I want to highlight about what Sheila shared is the critical importance of that senior leadership buy-in, promoting good. When we are looking at whether we're going to work with an organization, it's really important for us to see that commitment exists at the top. It is very hard to move this work forward within an organization if the CEO is not just a cheerleader, right, but actively moving the work forward. And so I think as we think about how this work can expand within our community, I think we want to encourage and push all of our CEOs to understand the leadership role, the active leadership role, right, that needs to be taken by them, not just in making the statement, but that in making sure that leaders across the organization are accountable to these things this practice that we are talking about. And so that is really, really critical. Thank you, Sheila.
Okay.
So I'm going to move to our second question, or I should say, it's two questions. So I'm going to invite our panelists to answer one of two questions. So, this work is hard and there are things that get in our way. One of the challenges, right, is that often either barriers are presented when we start to move the work forward, or there is resistance, and that resistance can be internal or it can be external. And the resistance, can happen for a lot of different reasons, right? It can be that somebody doesn't understand what this work is, but it can also be resistance, of the unknown. It is also hard to move this work forward if there are multiple priorities, right? We are all overwhelmed, and Brian sort of started by talking about, right, like how complicated things have been over the past few years, and there's a lot of pressures on people. And so why is this still important? So I'm going to invite each of our speakers to answer one of those two questions. So either to speak about the barriers or resistance, or how do you manage this amongst competing priorities? And we're going to start this round with Liz.
Thank you. Yeah, so I will answer the question about how we maintain focus in the face of maybe internal or external resistance. And, one of the things, to exactly what Brian talked about, we are living in a very complex world where we're dealing with complex challenges that require, us to be able to, problem solve, right? In a way that will, help, move, address these, complex problems in a way that will help us move forward in a much better way. And so one of the things that, happens, especially in construction, you're gonna need those different perspectives, right? To come in and say, all right, this, this is where we're at. This is where we need to move. How, how can we do that? I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second, but having, all of us with our different experiences coming in and looking at, our, challenges through our different lens ultimately helps to, for us, provide a, product that is, great for the client, right? So in order to do that, we need to make sure that everybody at the table has that different experience and has that, ability to share their perspective. The other thing too is it makes good business sense, right? Our clients expect this. So whenever we are running into any kind of resistance, one of the things that I like to remind myself is that we are not going to be able to really do our job if we cannot demonstrate to our clients that we value what they value, right? Which means we're putting residents to work. We are putting, women and folks of color to work, right? These, what we are, the city of Worcester actually, we have these workforce goals that are important to them. So we need to be able to demonstrate that we can do that. And if we can't, we're not going to, be able to win these exciting projects. So, and that same thing goes for our private clients, right? So that's one way in which I try to move through that resistance, remind folks that it's good business sense.
Thank you, Liz. And we have a question from the audience that I want to answer. It's a really great question. What does success in this work look like, feel like? And I think what I will say is that it looks uncomfortable. It sometimes looks different. And sometimes the resistance that we face, right, is that many of us, and this is human nature, don't like change, right? We do things the way we do things. And so this work from a process perspective looks different, feels different, and that causes discomfort, right? We have to talk about things that we don't want to talk about. And so there is going to be difficulty as this work moves forward. But I think success also looks like that the community feels included, as Liz was just talking about in the projects, right? The community at the end of the work that is hard feels reflected, right? Feels seen in the projects, that all of your employees feel safe at work, right? That they feel like they are having opportunities to thrive. And so there is discomfort in some of this resistance and some of these challenges that the panelists are going to be talking about. But at the end of the day, it means that all of us, and not just some of us, feel good at work, right? Or at school or in the community. And so thank you for that question. And thank you, Liz, for sharing what you did. I want to invite Sheila now to respond.
Sure. One of the things I mentioned it earlier is how we keep this intentionally and drive the focus is by incorporating it into all of our strategies. So when we're looking at our strategic plan initiatives, inclusion and diversity has goals and it has initiatives that we need to face. So that is really how we keep it top of mind, top focus with all of our teams. It really is truly embedded in everything that we do. Liz mentioned that they included in their meetings. We have all hearts meetings with our colleagues where this is always a topic of conversation. And in financial services, what is unique about Fidelity Bank is we have a unique approach called life design. And life design calls us to give our clients the clarity that they need to make informed decisions and move with confidence. And so the clarity, care, and confidence is top of mind. It is a wonderful fit with making sure that all of our clients and all of our colleagues feel empowered. They feel that they have what they need to be successful. So we make sure that we keep this top of mind in everything that we do. And what makes it look good or feel good is when you look at some of the statistics. So in answer to your question, the other day I was pleasantly surprised as we looked at our metrics. And our organization is 60% women in our senior leadership team and 70% women in our organization. I'll say that again because I'm feeling girl power this morning. 70% of our organization is women and 60% of our senior leaders are women. So to me, it's when you have diverse voices at the table, you can make better decisions and it makes your organization better. And that's how strategically having the right people at the table at the right time, making decisions, not just for today, but for the future. That's how we really maintain focus. We look at it strategically. It's embedded in who we are and what we do each and every day. It really is a genuine, it is a natural, genuine feel in terms of who we are as an organization and the types of people that we hire.
Thank you, Sheila, for your response and for answering our caller's question. Brian, what do you want to share?
Well, first of all, it's hard to say anything that hasn't already been said. It's been really comprehensive by Liz and Sheila, and I appreciate their examples. I'll choose the how do we anticipate and address barriers and resistance. And like Liz, I'll provide just a bit of a context in that I am the very first or the inaugural Chief Diversity Officer for UMass Memorial. When I came on board just 2 years ago, I'm beginning my 3rd year this month, the organization had recently completed, through Promoting Good, an assessment of our organization, which essentially gave attention to areas that were threats and or challenging areas that needed attention and where there was some strengths. When sitting down with operational leaders, it was clear that there needed to be a real clear focus on our HR. And as has been stated, whether it's our recruitment, our retention, the way in which we develop our workforce and celebrate our workforce for the many accomplishments. And when we're doing that, be very intentional about looking at, well, who are we hiring? Who are we retaining? Who's actually leaving and who's being celebrated? And when you get to that granular level of data analysis, you begin to see patterns. And in that regard, in seeing those patterns, you are either favorably predisposed to what you see, you could be negatively impacted by what you see, but not know what to do about it. But all in all, you need a cabinet of many others looking in, translating, and strategizing on what do we do. So like the other speakers have said, it being a part of the strategic plan was critical. Having strategic leadership lean in was really important. And then staying the course, not that I can say stay the course, but really empowering or our leaders being empowered to stay the course. And so promoting good, not that I'm promoting good, but I'm promoting good, really has done an outstanding job in working with us, because it was not just the assessment that was done. Then there was the translation. And then it had to be some internal work based upon the translation of the findings, correlating with some of our internal data to really show where we have some challenges and threats to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so we set out to really focus in one key area, which is human resources, which is a broad bandwidth of services, whether it's benefits or engaging in the aspects of an investigation to determine in just kind of what we are going to do to resolve conflicts in the workplace. And they occur every day. And so we had to think about, well, what kind of training would be appropriate? So we started off with anti-racism training. And in that regard, there could be those who would say, well, why do we need this? And this is uncomfortable, as Valerie said. And then once we receive this, what are we supposed to do with it? How do we practice? How do we become competent in something that we've never had to think about? Things that we've never had to do. But that's the point. Because in the absence of that skill set, many other people were disadvantaged, while a lot of people remained advantaged. And so I just want to say that the resistance is a constant. The barriers, if you're doing good work, will always surface. It's the persistence in staying the course, identifying when those barriers surface, with whom do you collaborate with? Because you're not going to be the know-it-all for all things called barriers. But many other people and many other stakeholders in this game are really right there to help and assist. They're referred to as allies. I kind of have a difficult time with that concept, but nonetheless, there are a lot of people who are looking for opportunities to collaborate, not necessarily lead, but complement the efforts that you really want to build upon. And I just want to say that in doing this work, we're standing on the shoulders of so many other people who have opened the door to get us to the table, right? And then we're bold enough to be at the table and speak our voice. we're also looking around the table to see who else is there or who isn't there. Make sure that as we move from this table to the next one, we don't forget about leaving the door open. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So I want to invite each of you to speak to what success feels like for either your workforce or the public. And I think Sheila, in particular, maybe I'm thinking about you we'll start with you in the banking sector, right? If this work is successful, what does it mean for, a person of color who is, right, coming to you as a client? Like what does the success of this work means that their experience will be when they visit you?
Sure. And for me in my work, what success looks like is a community that is sustainable, where everyone has equal opportunities to financial services, and they are met in terms of how they come to the bank. So for example, we recently had 2 consultants that did a training on the money mindset. And one of the things we took from that training is what we call the power of the pause, because each of us comes at money matters quite differently. We have different experiences and different perspectives. So as we're trying to help clients get to where they want to be and give them the clarity that they need to move forward with confidence, we have to meet them at where they are. So for example, some clients, as we're talking about online banking and mobile banking and bill pay and doing things digitally, we might be working with a client who has never had a checking account, who currently pays their bills by money order, or who might be using a check cashing service. So for us, we're really making sure that we are meeting the clients where they are and moving them along so that we can help them financially make those small decisions, but also help them when it's time to purchase their first home. Because we know buying a house is not just buying a house, it is providing a roof over your head for your family, or getting a car. That's more freedom to get to where you want to be and to give you a right to work, which will also allow you to put more money in your family's pocket. So it is a different mindset with us as we're trying to help our clients get to where we want to be. So we try to be intentional about having those life design conversations with our clients and making sure that we're using our 4-step care process by way that we're connecting, collecting, analyzing, recommending, and executing on a solution that is best for them. So for us, what success looks like is a diverse client base that is thriving, and that we're supporting people to solutions that will help advance them, and a community where we're putting not only our dollars, but we're being intentional about our financial support and intentional about our volunteer efforts to support the community. So for us, success looks like a thriving community, a thriving client base, and a thriving colleague base that really is reflective of the communities that we serve.
Thank you, Sheila. We have another question, but before I go to that other question, I want to ask Liz or Brian whether you want to add something to the question Sheila just answered about what success looks like.
Liz, I'll give you first.
Oh, no. No, thank you. So I'll answer it in the form of a story. This was, last year in the summer. We had a young man walk into the office, Worcester Tech grad, had sort of stepped away from the industry and was looking to come back in, and was looking for an opportunity to work on one of our projects. And so, we were able to make a connection with one of our partners, and he called me on after his first day and said, "Thank you. That was the best day I've had in a while." Right? Like, that is what success looks like for us, right? When we know we've helped someone have an opportunity to really start building a career, building a life in, a city that they grew up in. And that, that's, something that we, want to keep replicating, right? Everybody deserves an opportunity to succeed, and especially, our young folks, again, from, historically, marginalized communities. That's something that we want to do. So that day was, I got home and I was like, this is why I'm here, right? Like, this is why I'm doing this work.
Thank you, Liz.
Yeah, I just want to give a brief example of that. And Dr. Eric Dixon, our CEO, had a vision to commit to addressing the needs of the immigrant community. And we have focused on the Ghanaian population. And we have a great need. Healthcare, in terms of our workforce, is dwindling, and we're challenged to retain top talent and continue to recruit areas of need within our organization. And there are certain positions that are really critical to the work that we do. And so we needed to, in engaging the Ghanaian community, we needed to start internally, as Sheila mentioned earlier. We needed to start by examining what is the work conditions, what are the work experiences of Ghanaian caregivers. And we conducted a series of listening sessions. And through those listening sessions, I've been incredibly humbled. And it revitalizes me all the time. I just listening and hearing the stories of those who serve our institution, support the ways in which we do patient care. And without them, we would not be able to do what we do. They're front line. And what they said during those listening sessions, that we need more help. We need more money. We need more respect. And we need to have more role clarification, because there are a lot of conflicts in the workplace, end up going to HR. They consume a significant amount of time, and the issues are rarely resolved. And so by putting attention here, it's that intentionality to stay committed to addressing problems and concerns, but not doing it from the top down, but really listening and working from the middle and going in both directions to make sure that the caregivers feel heard. They become the ambassadors of the organization that you're seeking to recruit other members from their communities to. And it's taking care of and making sure our own house is in better condition. And when you begin to invite other people in, they will begin to have better experiences. And so that's my response.
Thank you, Brian. I want to share, I think, what is a very important question that is coming from the audience. And I'm going to read it. So the question is, do you have any real world strategies that I can use in situations where I, as an underpowered worker, can call out management who is failing to use the lens of DEI in our work, that don't see the value or the need for it, or just don't see their bias? And I think, this is the kind of situation where leadership maybe isn't on board or isn't holding folks accountable. And so what is your advice for that worker or others who might see what is happening? And this is a hard question, right? But this is the work.
I think one is not being afraid to fail is really important, and fearing failure or feeling as though if you go and you enter this conflict, you're putting your family's well-being, your job well-being in jeopardy. And so trying to assess how hot is the conflict that you want to address and how urgent is the need for it to be addressed. And with whom can you develop partnership so that it's not just you that's going to have that discussion with said manager, but it's a composition of others. And it's not just others who look only like you, because the experiences that you're having, it's pretty reliable that other people are having it too. So the due diligence is to discover who else is having the problem before we go try to solve the problem. And then to be able to, when you do that, perhaps come forward with some concrete suggestions. As managers, we often, field a lot of problems. And in that regard, we don't necessarily field the solutions. And from the people who are experiencing the challenge, they're the best insight into what some of those solutions might be. And then we're not looking for change overnight. We would just like change to begin. So setting realistic expectations as well will lessen the pressure in that particular, conversation, rather than looking at it as a conflict that needs to be resolved overnight.
Thank you. Liz and Sheila, do you want to add to that?
Oh, I think Brian.
Yeah.
hit the
No,
nail on
and
the
I
head.
agree in terms of what Brian said. One of the, another strategy, if you have the ability to partner or share your story with someone in HR, one of the things that we did at Fidelity is we, on an annual basis, conclude an employee survey. And in that survey, you're able to ask certain questions that will get to the heart of, do people feel comfortable to be their authentic self at work? Do they feel valued? Do they feel that their opinions are heard? And when you take some of those questions as a collective whole and get that feedback, to Brian's point, I'm sure it's not just one person that is feeling underrepresented or not heard. So if you have a partner in HR that you could share how you feel and share your story, and perhaps they could also help to advise in terms of the best next steps and how to affect change.
Thank you, Sheila. And I think what I will add is that these are situations that require bravery. But for that person who is from an underrepresented group, who doesn't have a lot of power in the institution, you need to think about whether you can be brave, or whether what you need is for others to be brave. Right? Because if you really need this job for financial reasons, right? It may not be the best choice for you to take this on by yourself. And so identifying, and this speaks to the allyship thing that Brian was speaking to earlier, and whatever word you choose to use for that person, right, who is accountable. I think identifying who those folks are, and and it is okay if you decide not to do anything, if that is the best thing for you, right? Personally, emotionally, financially. And sometimes the only thing you can do is perhaps to walk away, and that is okay. And so, I just want to be honest, right? I think we need the bravery of a lot of people, but depending on the power that we hold, we have differing abilities to be brave.
Great point, Valerie.
Yes, great.
So in our last 6 minutes, unless we have some other questions that come in, I want to close by asking each of you to share, sort of a key takeaway. So, we want to inspire our audience to leave wanting to do this work, wanting to build on this practice. And so what is one takeaway that's going to help them to act concretely? And I'm going to go with Brian first, and then Liz, and then Sheila.
Okay, I got 3. You told me.
That's fine. You can get.
I'll do it in very rapid pace. Diversity is everyone's work, just like Liz pointed out. It's not just in the diversity office that diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging will take place. 2 is not being afraid to fail. The key is fail early, learn as much as you can, and lean in and move it forward. And then the last, if you want to go far, or if you want to go fast in getting this work done, go alone. But if you want to go far, build coalitions and go together. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Liz?
Thank you. You know, I'm just gonna, you know, repeat something that, you know, we've touched on, I think, throughout this whole conversation, which is moving with intentionality, right? This is not a race, you know, like we need to be, you know, in order to do this work well, we need to take our time and, you know, and do it well, right? And if we are not preparing our organizations to, you know, like within our organizations, if we're not prepared to move forward together, you know, that's when we, you know, are constantly going to be running into this, you know, resistance. And so I think, you know, starting, you know, by identifying, you know, your culture, right, and you know, and the things that need to change, and you know, by moving slowly and creating those priorities, you know, will help move everybody together at the same time. So moving with intentionality is my key takeaway.
Thank you, Liz. Sheila?
Very easily start with quick wins. Listen to your colleagues and clients, and then learn. Because as you're listening, you're going to learn what you're doing well and what we need to change or adjust. But the important thing is really to start the work. And you start small. I always say you can't boil the ocean, and we can't affect change all in one day. So start with small wins, listen, and then learn.
Thank you, Sheila. I'm going to add my own takeaway, and then I'm going to hand it back, I think, to Peter to close. And so I think my feedback is going to be about learning to identify your own behaviors that make it hard for you to do this work. And so we've talked about the importance of understanding the experience of others. And so we need to really listen to that experience. And before we start listening, we need to remind ourselves how we react unproductively, right? And so if you tend to get defensive, if you tend to deny, right? If you tend to interrupt, we want to be mindful of those behaviors so that we can stop ourselves from bringing them into the space, because it doesn't allow us to do the listening that we need to move from those intentions to action. And so learn what those behaviors are and catch yourself before you exhibit them. So thank you, Liz. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Brian. And I'm going to turn it over to Peter.
So you thanked Liz, Sheila, and Brian, and Valerie. Thank you for kind of hosting a really good session. You know, Brian, I just love that your go fast alone, go far together. It's really distilled kind of recap that says, you know, no shortcuts, baby, right?
Right.
And so it's a great conversation. So thank you all for your time, and I hope everyone enjoyed this conversation. I certainly did. Special thanks to Fidelity Bank and Community Health Connections for sponsoring today's forum. And as I mentioned previously, this session will be captured in a video, and you can take those great comments and run those pull quotes over and over again if you'd like to on once you get that video link. But thanks everyone for a terrific session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.